Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to kindly take your seats, please? We're about to begin this high-level event. And that makes it official. So at this point, let me turn the floor over to our moderator, Sana.
Hello and a very warm welcome to our panelists and of course you, the audience. We mustn't forget the overflow conference room due to the popularity of this event. Dr. Zerbo will kindly kick us off with the event.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to this unique event of series of the presence here and elsewhere around the globe for those who are following this event online. I'm particularly grateful to the panelists who will be introduced in a few moments by the two moderators, Ms. Sanam Chantey of France 24 and Mr. Julien Borger from the Guardian News and Media. I'm also delighted to recognize several members of the recently launched CTBT youth group and other young people, students, researchers, young professionals sitting along our main stakeholders, you, the ambassadors, distinguished representatives of our member states, and your staff. Later this morning, and you know already, we'll be welcoming United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who, despite his tight schedule, has agreed to take part in the panel that is about to begin now. The importance of the United Nations in advancing the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty cannot be overstated. And I'm convinced that the presence of the Secretary General and his High Representative, Mr. Kim Won-soo, will greatly contribute to raising awareness about the urgency of turning the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty into global law. We can no longer wait for the CTBT to enter into force. The risks are too high and the expectation too great. I wish the fellow panelists a productive and thought-provoking discussion and look forward to your question and comment. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbo. Before we start, I would and the audience here a way for the international community to be able to prevent a potential nuclear arms race. Now, those of you that are following the event online, please feel free to use the hashtag CTBT20 to submit your questions. Of course, if anyone here is tweeting the event, do the same. As for me, I'm Sanam Chantey, as Dr. Zerbo mentioned. I am a British-Iranian journalist. I work for France 24. Prior to that, I was with Reuters News Agency, and I established for them their operation in Tehran, during which time I covered and witnessed the escalation of the nuclear standoff with the international community. But I was also lucky enough to be here in Vienna last year with the nuclear agreement, also known as a JCPOA, which was struck between Tehran and the West, along with my colleague here, Julien Borger, who will take a couple of minutes to introduce himself.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'm Julien Borger. I'm the World Affairs editor of The Guardian. Yes, and I also spent a lot of time in hotel lobbies here waiting for the Iran deal to be done. But it was worthwhile in the end. My role today will be in some way to be a sort of tribune of the people, if that's the right collective noun for ambassadors. But there are other people here as well, and when this panel opens up, I'll be going around taking questions and feeding them to the panel and make this as much a dialogue and a debate as possible.
Before we kick off the panel discussion, I would very much like to express how grateful we are that the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is able to join us today, who will be coming in approximately 1 hour. And in the meantime, we look forward to receiving some lively, thought-provoking questions from the floor. Our first speaker is a leading figure in the disarmament community and who brings to the panel over 3 decades of both diplomatic and policy experience. Mr. Kim Won-soo was appointed the United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs in 2015. Prior to that, he held several senior positions at the United Nations, in addition to the diplomatic service of the Republic of Korea. Throughout his work, Mr. Kim has made it his personal mission to promote public awareness of the CTBTO and to tackle any questions surrounding non-proliferation and disarmament. Mr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Can I? Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank all of you who have come to join us, and I'm really impressed by the fullness of this room, and despite such a short notice, I'm truly impressed by Lassina and his team's convening power and organizational finesse, and that's I think, ample testament to how CTBTO has made a lot of advances for the last 20 years, despite still important obstacles to be overcome. Before I start, also, I'd like to say a thank you also to Vice Chancellor, former Vice Chancellor Spindleger, who has been a strong supporter and also friend of the UN and the Secretary General. And it is great to see you again here in Vienna. CTBT, Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, was intended as a key cornerstone of the package deal 20 years ago, when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was extended indefinitely. So it was a great success to have adopted CTBT 20 years ago. Up to that point, a lot of excitement, and then we intended to follow up with the second piece, which is the initiation of a negotiation on fissile material. But as all of us know very well, for the last 20 years, on both fronts, entry into force of CTBT and the initiation of a negotiation on fissile material have been delayed. So this has created a lot of disappointment and led to frustration of the international community at a very crucial time, as Sanam Shante also referred to. But that does not mean that we have not made progresses. We have been successful in institutionalizing the international taboo against nuclear testing, and after the adoption of CTBT, it was violated only 3 countries, and in this century, only by 1 country. But still, 1 is too many, and we have to bring it down to 0 as quickly as possible. And for that purpose, UN and CTBTO have no other choice but to work together, because Secretary General and UN has not only moral and political obligation, but also legal responsibility, because Secretary General is the custodian of the treaty as its depository. So Secretary General and Lassina have written a letter to all those 8 remaining Annex II countries for their earliest possible action. And our focus should continue to be on those 8 countries, so that we can make CTBT enter into force without any further delay. And each and every ratification of these 8 remaining countries will be important, not only for the entry into force of CTBT, but also as an important contribution to build confidence in the broader nuclear disarmament agenda. If 2 remaining nuclear powers recognized by the NPT, namely US and China, ratify the CTBT, it will not only help advance the universality of CTBT, but also it will send a very positive message to the non-permanent members to demonstrate the seriousness and commitment of nuclear weapon states to nuclear disarmament. Likewise, if Iran, as Sanam alluded to, JCPOA has been concluded successfully here in Vienna. So if Iran ratifies CTBT, and then it will give positive impact on Israel and Egypt. And if these three countries ratify the CTBT, it will be a very important confidence-building measure in advancing our efforts to create nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. So every single ratification by these 8 countries will matter a lot in a broader sense. But also we should not forget we have another more than 20 countries in non-Annex II categories who have not ratified. And a number of these countries may not been able to do so, not because they are not politically willing, but maybe because they lack the capacity. So our office and Lasina's office have stepped up our joint efforts to help these countries build the capacities so that they can also ratify CTBT. Just today, we met the governors network also can add their voice to the senators from states, politicians, international community. And if we pool our wisdom and collective will, we believe it is still doable. And we count on all of you for your strong support in that regard. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Our next panelist has had not just one, but several pivotal roles in Vienna and Austria's diplomatic community. Dr. Michael Spindelegger is, of course, a former Vice Chancellor, Minister of Finance, and Minister of Foreign Affairs. In his latter role, he was a staunch supporter of the CTBT and the CTBTO as the countries in terms of hosting the organization. Today, Dr. Spindelegger is a Secretary General of the International Center for Migration Policy Development. So you have the floor.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Mr. Kim, Mr. Executive Secretary. I'm really delighted to be here to discuss today with you 20 years of CTBT. This is just a long time. And I appreciate very much, of course, to be with you, Mr. Kim. We have been working together very close when he was leading the office of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and now he is responsible for disarmament, being Under Secretary General. Congratulations to that. And I think it's worth to talk about CTBT today, because when I got being announced as a Foreign Minister of Austria, I had a visit, of course, to United Nations office here, and I've seen all the different organizations within the United Nations organization. And CTBTO was one of the most interesting. Why? It's exceptional. We are now celebrating 20 years of a treaty that never came into force. But of course we have done a lot of efforts. You have to see, after this treaty was signed, every country of the world had to recognize they cannot make any test of nuclear bombs without being detected. So it stopped. Even if this treaty is not into force, a lot of efforts were made since that. Second issue, I was very much impressed being in these conferences organized by CTBTO, an organization that never was officially, of course, established, but is working very well. I have seen all these academics discussing together how to establish new processes, new technical equipment. And if you have a look that over 300 hotspots all over the world are established just to recognize if everybody in the world would like to test a nuclear bomb, this is really impressive. So I think, of course, this organization that is not officially in place has done a lot during the last 20 years. And the third point I would like to raise is it's exceptional that also public opinion has done a lot just to make efforts in disarmament. We know it has not come to an end, but I think this is the main driver in the seat in future, public opinion, that people do not want to have these nuclear bombs all over the world. More and more countries that would like to have also nuclear bombs, just to be strong and powerful. That's so dangerous for all of us. And I think what we have to do is just to support public opinion, to have politicians that are dealing with disarmament in the future, to have side events of General Assembly of United Nations, to have a lot of conferences that something is going on. And I think as we have to see elections in United States this year, maybe a new administration can make a new effort just to come along with signature to this treaty and to see that we really can do something in disarmament. It's so dangerous. I've read the New York Times, I think some days ago, where you have a wonderful article telling us new bombs are arriving with new technology, smaller but more deadly, more dangerous for everybody. So if this is the race for the future, I think everybody has to support this idea of disarmament and to make this organization a strong one. And they can do maybe additional things in the future. And we know this is really necessary to have a peaceful world in the future. So I really appreciate that 20 years anniversary of this organization and this treaty is going to be celebrated today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Spindelegger. Finally, I'm pleased to introduce Ambassador Susan Lejeune d'Algerchek, a permanent representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations and several other international bodies here in Vienna. Ambassador Lejeune has represented the UK since September 2012. Previously, she served as a board member of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. She's also had a stint in the Non-Proliferation Department of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I'm also pleased to announce that Ambassador Lejeune has recently joined the CTBT group of eminent persons. Ambassador Lejeune, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for asking me to be a member of this panel, Dr. Zerbo. I was asked to talk a little bit about what the group of eminent persons does, what our role is. I feel a bit of a fraud because I certainly don't feel very eminent, but I will play my role. As I understand it, what we are here to do is to make the case for the CTBT with the 8 remaining countries who have not yet ratified and who are needed for the treaty to enter into force. And the reason I agreed to take on the role is because I think that without the CTBT, the world would be a lot less safe place. The CTBT has made a huge contribution to our security and the safety of this world. I was thinking about what the world might look like if we didn't have the CTBT. Looking back to when I was growing up in the 1980s, at the height of the Cold War, when the threat of nuclear war was real. We saw it on the television. I remember seeing public information films telling us what to do if there was a nuclear attack. Today, that is a spectre that is no longer part of my children's existence. They find these things very difficult to understand. In the 1960s, President Kennedy predicted that there would be another, perhaps 20 nuclear weapon states by the end of his term as president. Well, that hasn't happened. And one of the main reasons that has happened is because the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the CTBT have ensured that the further proliferation of nuclear weapons has not happened. We've had, as we've already heard, only 8 tests since 1998, and only one of those has taken place this century. It's obviously very, very clear that that's unacceptable, and that is why the entry into force of the CTBT is so important. I think there's a risk that because the treaty has been around for 20 years and because effectively it's functioning today, catastrophic scientific community worldwide. I was lucky enough to go in 2014 to the field exercise which took place in Jordan, and to see American, Israeli, Iranian, Russian, British, Chinese scientists and experts all working together, I think was a quite extraordinary experience, and I think it's probably unique to the CTBT. To lose that would be, I think, very bad. We would also lose one of the only organisations in the world which is a genuinely open source organisation. Anybody who is a member of the CTBT has access to the information it gathers. That was the case before anybody knew what open source was or used it. So I think this is a really important model for the future as to how such organisations should work. And the third point is that the information that the CTBT gathers has plenty of other uses. We have seen, unfortunately, in the last few days, the impact of catastrophic earthquakes, particularly in Ecuador. The CTBT's information and scientific knowledge can help analyse those events and make sure that we are better prepared for when they happen in the future. So I see the risk not as one of negativity. As Dr. Spindelegger said, public opinion is very much behind the work of this organisation, but I think there's a danger of apathy, of assuming that because it's working now, it will always be there. That is not the case, and that is why I and the other members of the group will work tirelessly with those remaining 8 countries to try and make sure that the treaty enters into force very, very soon. Thank you.
Before I hand this over to my colleague and co-moderator Julian, I would like to pose a question to Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, North Korea is the only country to have conducted a full-scale nuclear test this century. That's 4 to date. A 5th one is potentially on the horizon. Now, what can the international community do to prevent an escalation? As we saw with Tehran, sanctions were not effective. How can we start dialogue and bring the North to the table?
I think it's a billion-dollar question. And of course, I mean, that's the biggest headache we have at the moment on disarmament and other peace and security agenda. Of course, the Security Council is on top of that because Security Council has adopted a series of sanctions resolution, and the last resolution is, I think, maybe the most stringent sanctions ever imposed on any member state. So it is more stringent than the sanctions on Iran, and that much international community, as also demonstrated by the unity of the Security Council in opposing those moves by the DPRK, sends very strong signal to them. So we hope DPRK will desist from any further actions, and we have seen worrying reports about another possible test. We hope it will not happen, and also we hope members of the 6-party talks and also other interested parties can figure out how we can bring this matter back to the negotiating table. Because one great thing about JCPOA with Iran, if we can solve non-proliferation challenge by diplomacy, that's the best possible option for the international community. And we hope same thing can happen again on the DPRK case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim. I will now hand over to my colleague, Julian.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to be taking questions from the floor. Please stick up your hands. And when you have a question, identify yourself. And if there's someone particularly on the panel that you want to address your question to, say who you'd like to, in particular, to answer it. If I may use the prerogative of asking a question myself as well, just to get things kicked off and while people think of questions. I wanted to go a little bit further in the consequences of this continuing limbo of non-entry into force. Ambassador Lejeune said one of them would be potentially there are wider dangers, there are wider consequences of continuing drift, and I wonder if one or any of you could go into those a bit further. Maybe start with Dr. Zerbo.
Okay, I was trying to escape, but I mean, this is a question that I've had several times, and recently again in Moscow. Talking about risk, let me give an example. I was recently talking to former Secretary of Defense 19, Bill Perry, who has always been of the impression that the longer the CTBT stands in this limbo, I mean political or legal limbo, the more the risk of seeing those who have expectation, for instance, of improving the nuclear weapon, and so far haven't been able to do so because of the international monitoring system and the verification regime that the CTBT is putting in place, that those could feel the fatigue and then say, why bother? If nothing is happening to this treaty, maybe we should continue improving our weapon. That's one risk. The other risk is seeing North Korea continuing testing in two sides, and then make sure there's no thing in doing Korea. We should think about how we feel this organization working, that the political limbo is putting us in a difficult situation.
Does anyone want to briefly add to that before I open up to the floor? Or?
Could I just add on a couple of practical points? The CTBTO, in theory, is not a 24/7 organisation. It can only be a 24/7 organisation when the treaty enters into force. The fact that it does respond immediately to events as and when they happen is founded on the goodwill of the staff who work for it at the moment. It would be very nice if that was based on a bit more than goodwill. And the second point is that if there were a nuclear or a suspected nuclear test somewhere, at the moment the CTBT does not have the right to go in and conduct an on-site inspection. They would be able to do that, obviously, when the treaty enters into force.
Thank you very much. As this roving mic, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And my name is Mr. Kitano. I'm a Japanese ambassador and permanent representative here. And first, I thank Racina to propose a moment of silence and for earthquake which happened in Ecuador and my country, Japan. Kazakhstan, and we are playing the role of an Article 14 co-coordinator, and we are trying to push this forward. And we recognize, and you identified 8 remaining countries, and we very much respect the sovereign decision of these countries, and it is their sovereign decision whether they would ratify or sign each very much important international treaty. And we know that there is an internal situation involved, and as you rightly pointed out, and in some cases, or in most of the cases, regional dimension is also related to that. What we can do, and those who get together around this table, and what we can do is raising awareness and focus political attention. Then the question is how to translate that into entering into force, and in addressing in the internal situation and regional dimension. In doing so, how United Nations can be helpful and conducive in this context? That is a question I would like to. Thank you.
Go ahead. It's okay.
Of course, I mean, there is very hard task to achieve because remaining 8 countries may be the most difficult in Annex 2 category. But we cannot relent in our efforts. And we have to continue to reach out to those 8 countries individually, at the highest level, at the working level, at the grassroots level. So, and also our message has been consistent to them reminding them, you don't have to wait for any other in those remaining 8 to ratify first, and then everything will be locked up. So we encourage any of those remaining 8 to break first. And then it will encourage others who also have taken wait-and-see approach with regard to others. So that's Secretary General and Lassina have kept reminding those leaders by sending out letters almost every year, Japan and Kazakhstan, for taking up this leadership. So there's no magic solution, and there's no magical answer in the world. But we have to continue our engagement of the United States. Write letters to their senators, remind them, there's a job to do. So that kind of campaign also has to go on. So we have to pursue all these efforts in parallel until the job is done.
We've got another question next door to you, right? If you still have got the mic, right down here at the front. Sorry, it's on the other side, right here. This gentleman here.
Thank you indeed. I'm the ambassador of Romania, and I currently am the chair of the Parliament Celebrate. Now, it happened that I attended the negotiations in Geneva 20 years back. And I remember that at the time, a discussion was held with regard to a possibility of a waiver clause with respect to this condition of Annex II ratifications. At the time, that waiver clause was rejected. But I would like to ask, do you think in favor of the condition of ratification by the Annex II state? Thank you.
The waiver is a plan B. Who would like to?
Say that I don't believe the treaty will stay in limbo. I avoid to even thinking about that. Okay, I'm confident that we'll get this treaty into force soon. The reason why I say this is the current geopolitical landscape makes the CTBT an urgency. Can we afford to see North Korea continuing testing with the risk that others might do? Can we look at, in a stovepipe manner, the issue of arms control and non-proliferation the way it is today? Can we close our eyes to the reality of the threat we see? We talk about terrorists getting access to fissile material and then do dirty bomb. We can't continue doing this. Ambassador Lejeune said, if the CTBT is not in force, what do we do if somebody conducts a clandestine test? North Korea does it, and then they say it anyway. What about somebody doing a test and not talking about it? The only institution that is capable of giving the technical specification to countries to that effect is the CTBT and its international monitoring system. So what? We give the information, we condemn, we say sanction, and then what if the countries say that's not me? We're lacking that on-site inspection component of the verification regime to be able to, if I can use this word, intrude a territory to conduct an inspection in order to give with clarity exactly and certainty that this is where the text has happened. Because we cannot afford to let this going as it is and then afford to see the geopolitical landscape the way it is, I don't believe this treaty will stay in limbo. There are other ideas, and I'm sure we'll come to this, and then I hope the Secretary General and his High Representative will take that question later. Many NGOs, civil society are talking about a resolution at the Security Council level or at the at the General Assembly level. But those are topics that are beyond the paycheck of the Executive Secretary in Vienna. I leave that to you, stakeholders, to see what you can do, and then probably to the Secretary General to be able to answer this question. But I don't believe this treaty will stay in limbo for so long.
Thank you very much. We've got a question here from.
Thank you very much for the floor. My name is Madeline, and I'm a member of the newly established youth group. Very much. Because often one of the problems that we have encountered is that sometimes they they fear going against the party line of their government by supporting something like non-proliferation and disarmament. So my question is, how can we engage these younger generations? How can we make them feel comfortable with stepping up on these themes? And what can the CTBTO do structurally to concretely support these younger generations? Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. If I may try to answer, of course, if you are dealing with politics in a democracy, you know, you can't decide against your citizens. So if citizens are very much in favor of something, discussions are starting. And even if you have, I don't know, another opinion as a state leader, of course you have to recognize there is a movement and you have to deal with that movement. So starting that in the different countries, they have not signed at the moment.
Because leading edge science, which excites lots of young people. So I think that's science diplomacy is a really good way into this debate. And the second thing I would say, and I think the CTBTO already does a lot of this, is really actively using new media and particularly social media to engage young people. The Executive Secretary is very active on Twitter. And I mean, it sounds trivial, but it's not trivial. It's really important because that is the way that most people much younger than me get their information. And I think we all have to be aware that that is an extremely powerful tool in order to stimulate public debate and then get people on board.
And we've got some questions in from Twitter, actually, where people are watching this, are aware of this, as far wider public aware of this through social media, as you said. And one of the questions from Rodrigo Saez is, which Annex II state will be the next to ratify it? And that's an invitation to place. Make a guess. Who would you put money on to be the next, if there was going to be a next? Anyone?
Of course, I mean, U.S. administration is very much committed, but again, as Minister Spindelegger suggested, I mean, in any democracy, that decision has to be approved by the Parliament, particularly in this case, the Senate. So the political climate at the Senate will be crucial. But also, as we have repeatedly suggested, any civil society or youth or local communities can help U.S. administration with raising awareness in their own states so that senators can take a much more proactive stance. And here, we always emphasize, I and also Lassina as well, that again, U.S. should not wait for the election to be over, because this issue has to be flagged as an urgent issue to show the commitment of the U.S. government to broader nuclear disarmament agenda. So that's the message we want to send out to the U.S.
Dr. Zeba?
Yeah, I can, let me take it from 3 different angles. First, my wish. Second, the reality. And then third, the practical sense of the dream of a young person. The wish is, I wish the 2 remaining Annex II countries, the 2 remaining nuclear power countries under NPT, namely the United States and China, would take the leadership to consider the ratification of the CTBT and then trigger. It's been going on for years, a nuclear weapon or WMD-free zone in the Middle East. It's been in limbo for some time, more in limbo than the CTBT itself. Some of us have been of the view that by considering the CTBT in that region could give a first step towards a WMD-free zone. Namely, 3 major countries in the Middle East have signed the CTBT. They've already said no to nuclear testing. It's a matter of getting them to say never. So we have Egypt, Israel, and Iran. They've both signed the CTBT. They believe in this treaty. They're committed to this treaty. How do we engage them through the CTBT to consider the ratification together and then open the NPT? That's a different question that can be discussed. So the dream of young people, wherever I go and I talk to young people, they say that, Mr. Zerbo, why don't you lock them all in the room and then get them to sign the treaty? Okay? That's a dream.
And do you think, in the answer to this question from Twitter, that the US at some day will ratify? Is it all? You may have to wait for the roving.
So first of all, thank you very much for this very kind opportunity. It was very kindly mentioned that in a democracy, as we continue to be, that there will be many opportunities for debate, discussion, interaction with civil society, and we expect that process to go on until we get to the moment when there's another opportunity for the Senate to give its advice and consent to this treaty, whenever that might happen. In the meantime, just to be clear, first of all, I think Dr. Zerbo, I hope, would agree that actually there is no greater supporter of his organization than the United States of America. I think that's true from any number of measures, and in fact, it would be very hard for me to see any difference in the way that we behave, the way we interact, the way we support the organization now than it would be after we ratify. And then finally, when it comes to weapons, if I can take advantage of the opportunity, just to be clear, we're not, in fact, developing new weapons at all. The New York Times is a very fine, independent journalistic enterprise, but it does not speak for the United States of America. In fact, what we're undertaking is what's called a stockpile stewardship program, which is designed to ensure that our stockpile, as long as we have it, and the President has made clear that his vision is that one day we hope that, that we and others will disarm. But until that time comes, we have an obligation to make sure that that stockpile is safe, secure, and reliable. And it is that program which is being undertaken, and which, by the way, Dr. Zerbo has seen in action when he visited our national security site in Nevada a few months ago.
Thank you very much. And we do have.
We are trying hard to try to ratify the CTBT as soon as possible, and we are sure that China will not of this treaty. But the People's Congress consists of different people. They still have different opinions on the ratification of the treaty. So the government and the government still facing the big challenge of persuading the Congress to ratify the CTBT, and we fully agree with some opinions that we should raise the awareness of the people in Congress and in different areas. Try to let these people aware more importance of the CTBT, and we hope that with all this education and work, we can finish the readings of the CTBT in the People's Congress and have this ratification come into force as soon as possible.
Can I a quick follow-up? What difference would it make if the U.S. Senate ratified? Would that make a big difference to the People's Congress?
The test is safe enough to keep the safety of. We have a lot of work to do.
Okay, we've got some questions that are coming in response to that. Fantastic, in terms of state safety. What's your response to that?
Ambassador Hensher from the United States talked about the stockpile stewardship program in the U.S. And what I want to say, as Executive Secretary, I don't like going into the discussion of modeling safe, not needing tests, and then no need for tests, and then therefore the CTBT can be into effect. Because it's for a handful of countries that have already weapons. They're the one considering the modernization, not modernization, in fact.
Washington. Of course, we have to continue our efforts with the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, because with those efforts, we can make sure that there will be a less amount of nuclear weapons-grade material available in the world. But also, we have to make better efforts at managing the existing stocks of nuclear and radioactive material, so that this material will not end up in the wrong hands. And here also we are concerned not only about nuclear or radiological material, but we are more concerned about chemical and biological. So the key word at the Nuclear Security Summit was CBRN security: chemical, biological, radioactive, and nuclear security. And there, the growing concern by leaders is on the growing nationalism, CBRN material security. So these CBRN material. But if anything happens, it will involve a lot of countries immediately, because then material will be stolen, and then it will be transited to the neighbors, and then it will assemble in a different country for eventual attack. So no country will be immune from this threat, and there is no other way but for us to step up our efforts to help all the states in the world to build their capacity and improve their preparedness. So it is very much very high of our agenda.
Can I just bring in the overflow room, because they're participating in this just as much as people in this room, and they've had their own questions. And one has come from Laura Werner, who's a student at the Regional Academy of the United Nations. And this is the question: women are key in peace building, peacekeeping and security. How can we bring more women to the table in order to achieve greater levels of disarmament and enter the treaty into force? So is there a specific role for women as well? Dr. Zambo has brought in CTBTO youth. There's a role here in particular for women. Question from the overflow.
Well, I'm not sure that a question about bringing more women probably shouldn't be answered by a woman. I think it's
very good point.
I think it's an issue. It's a problem across the whole of the security landscape. I mean, looking around this room, there are a reasonable number of women here, but this is not typical. And I think it is something which has to start very early on. Impressing on girls when they're at school that this is not a boys' subject, that we all have a role to play, that we all have a responsibility is absolutely key. But there is something about feeling uncomfortable if you're the only woman or one or two women in a real room full of lots and lots of men. And it's only when you start to build up a critical mass that everybody begins to feel more comfortable. So I think there's something we need a significant number of women. So there's that. But I also think across history, peace building, conflict resolution, conflict prevention have been most successful when women have been front and centre of those efforts. And it's partly to do with our role as mothers, but it's not just about that. I think a female approach sometimes brings something extra which adds to the resolution of these conflicts. Could I just say on nuclear security, sorry, the IAEA, the sister organisation of the CTBTO, has an absolutely crucial role to play in this, and they are hosting a major meeting in December this year. And to add to the remarks, this is not an issue which is only about nuclear weapons. Actually, the biggest risks of terrorists getting their hands on nuclear material comes from hospitals, radioactive sources which are less carefully guarded because they are not subject to the same sort of security measures. So those sorts of nuclear and radioactive sources are everywhere. So I think we need to broaden the understanding of exactly what we're talking about and make it clear that it isn't just a question of weapons and weapons-grade material.
I'm going to take a cluster of questions now, because I think in this part before the Secretary General arrives, we're maybe running out of time, so I'm going to take a cluster. First from this lady here.
Thank you very much. My name is Christina Kervanos. I'm also a student with the Regional Academy of the United Nations, and my question would be directed to Dr. Spindelegger, because it specifically refers to Austria's role in promotion of the CTBT forum. It could have a greater role in the promotion, and what would your view be on that? Thank you.
And here, would you just pass it forward?
Hi, my name is Anastasia Shurova. I'm a member of CTBTO youth group. Since Dr. Zerbo mentioned the name of Zik Hacker, and last week I happened to meet him, and he gave a beautiful presentation on how the United Union security on the scientific level, which was called a lab-to-lab approach. So my question is, do you
optimism is actually contagious, and we actually sense that. But this optimism is somewhat shadowed by the skepticism that is happening otherwise across the world. How do you see that affecting, advancing, or otherwise pushing back, rather, the entry into force of the CTBT in their artisans? Thank you.
Okay, to take the Austrian question, which is obviously for Dr. Spindelegger, and then the question of track 2. So,
I'll start with
start with
I'll start with the track 2.
Okay.
And the youth. First of all, Ambassador Lejeune said that we shouldn't leave women issue to be answered by a woman. Let me say, when I initiated the youth group, I didn't say boys youth or girls youth. And I think you've probably seen more women in the youth group talking than men, in fact. So it tells you that we're getting there. And the next point I wanted to make on women, the CTBT is an organization that has reached over 40% of women representation. That's something that is to be really appreciated, because we started from far. For simple reason, because we are a scientific and technical organization, and then it was difficult when they started to be addressed at youth level, and then force the situation to be tough and difficult questions. It's, I would say it's not $1 million question, it's a $10 million question. But seeing it from an optimistic side, let's hope that the political landscape today will not allow this type of getting out of the context of the CTBT and considering its signature ratification. Because the countries that were hesitant in 1996 for the signature of the CTBT see values in the international monitoring system and the verification regime that we're putting in place. It's only by having a solid verification regime that will convince those countries that the CTBT and its international monitoring system can contribute to their own national security. This is how we want to do our work, and then convince them to join, say no, and then never to nuclear testing. Thank you.
I will just add a quick voice of support to Lassina's last point, because we have to remember that more than 160 countries ratified CTBT is very significant achievement. We have that much, we don't have that much high number of ratifications on any other treaty. So we should not undo the achievement we have made because of our frustration about the delay in the entry into force of CTBT. So we have to keep these two tracks very much in parallel until the final destination can be reached. And also, I want to kick voice to one point to women's role in peace and security. As Ambassador Lejeune made very clear that in managing peace and security situations, there is no better shortcut to empowering women than appointing senior-most woman leader at the peacekeeping missions. So when Secretary General took over 9 years ago, there was 0 special representative in the field. But at one point, he appointed 7 women leaders as a head of peacekeeping missions, commanding more than 10,000 troops. So that is the best way to ensure a woman will play a very significant role. And also, in terms of protection and also the reaching out to the population, particularly victims, we found most effective way is to put maybe sometimes all women's police unit. So we have great success in deploying all women uniformed police unit in Liberia. And particularly women, the victims, feel much more comfortable with dealing with women's unit. And so we try to also expand.
And Senate, they have not been in favor at that time. Why not to start initiatives from national parliament? In the Senate in the United States, the People's Congress in China, maybe this could be a new initiative. And I think countries like Austria could be one of them.
Two of our nations doing in our capacity of chairing or coordinating the Excellency Mr. Kim provided us. I'm also rather optimistic, and I see that it could be a good domino effect if one breakthrough will be done soon. Let's hope, and let's use all roads and avenues that we do have. For instance, will appear to the joint statement of 2 leaders of Japan and Kazakhstan recently in Washington, D.C. at the Nuclear Security Summit. That was mentioned about the new media. Your Excellency, Mr. Kim will elaborate these.
Chaparwal from the diplomatic panelists, but especially for Executive Secretary Larbo. It's about, so do you see a nexus between the mandate of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the CTBTO? And do you feel that one possible reason for non-ratification of CTBTO is perhaps, if not stagnated, the very slow process of disarmament under the NPT? And if...
Thank you. I was very happy to hear the mentioning of science diplomacy, because I think it's highly underutilized in foreign ministries.
Just say who you are first.
Yeah. Oh, I'm Boris Berkovich, also a colleague of mine from the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. And what I was wondering, what concrete steps can be taken to...
NPT, and then I'll take North Korea, because North Korea is probably the closest to my issue in terms of banning a nuclear test explosion. Indeed, what do we do with North Korea? I tend to be of the view, like Dr. Zikheke, because I've met him too many times already, that the best way is to engage dialogue with them. Because while sanctions are stepping up, they're still talking about testing. That's not coming from us. This is what we see in the news. Mr. Kim mentioned the more stringent sanction, but one would assume that it will probably take some time before it's really effective to a point where it will stop them having the necessary material to do the testing. And the more they do test, because they talk, so the 20 years, this is what we all talk about now. But in saying that the CTBT and its international monitoring system and the progressive commissioning of its verification regime is, in my view, the environment where we see science pushing diplomacy. Because we give to our stakeholders, the diplomats and policymakers, the tools for them to know that indeed we can verify compliance with the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So there's no better way to show how science drives diplomacy than the CTBT and its verification regime, and precisely now its international monitoring system, and then what we've been giving to the international community for the past 20 years. And this is why I fully agree with you. Part of our capacity building effort should involve the nexus between science and diplomacy for the younger generation to be more interested in understanding the science that drives the diplomacy, for them to be the best policymakers as they discuss entry into force or arms treaty or any arms control and non-proliferation issue. And to that I will leave the $2 million question.
Of course, many issues in nuclear disarmament are interrelated. So the progress or lack of progress on one issue influences other issues. So there are the CTBT and
a diplomatic services which actually employs a scientist to be our chief scientist. And I have seen through his work how much the links that he has, particularly in countries where diplomatic relations might be a bit sticky, can help cross or overcome some of those difficulties. So I think scientists continue talking to each other. I mean, we heard throughout the Cold War, American and Russian scientists talk to each other, and that continues. And I think the on-site exercise in 2014 was an excellent example of how that works in practice today. And the second thing I would say is that in a time when resources are scarce, getting scientists to work together and to pool their findings on some of these issues makes absolute economic sense as well as scientific sense.
Thank you, Ambassador Lejeune. We'll take a moment just to have the tables taken off the podium before the Secretary General arrives, and then we'll take one last question.
Ludmila Bogdan.
Wait just a moment while we move. We'll do a bit of furniture removal
Just one moment,
here,
we need the tables
and then
taken
ask
off
your
the
questions.
stage.
If there's someone...
For our help. Thank you. Oh, cozy.
Executive Secretary will walk in with the Secretary.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, in the few minutes before the Secretary General arrives, you had a question at the back there. If you want to ask the remains of the panel.
Yes, I will work with what I got.
Good for you.
Ludmila Bogdan, a PhD student at the University of Vienna. And there is one thing that some countries are, let's say, persuaded / diplomatically pressured to sign and ratify the treaty, while, as we have heard today, some governments of other countries are supporting, so to say, this treaty, however, not ratifying it. And I'm wondering if it's a good idea to have something like expiration date, you know, if you are supporting it for 20 years and representatives of your country are saying that we are supporting for 20 years, maybe, you know, automatically you kind of are into it and your country has to ratify it, because how do you
someone, Dejao, describes himself as a student.
If we can keep the responses very brief, we're waiting for the Secretary General to arrive.
Maybe I will start answering your question. Of course, I think in politics you always see sometimes windows of opportunity. And it could be a window of opportunity now, celebrating 20 years of CTBT, just to start again initiative for that. But of course, this will not lead us directly to the signing ceremony. Of course, you need, of course, to get those people convinced that they have to do something. So I would like to advise you to have different elements. One is public opinion, young people in those respective countries starting initiative. Another one is to get also from an official side, from those countries who support the CTBTO, something together, maybe in the surroundings of the next General Assembly in the United Nations in autumn this year. And then, of course, if you pick that all together, maybe something is happening, and I hope that. But you have to be patient in diplomacy. That's one of the lessons I've learned as a foreign minister. So please be also patient that something will happen.
Thank you, Dr. Spindelegger. Anyone care to take the Trump question very by all means, Ambassador Lejeune. Mr. Kim. This is not the Diplomatic Academy of the
It is better keeping it rather than discarding it, and then we'll go back to not scale one, but maybe even worse situation. So I would advise we have to think about how to complement the legal gap we are now witnessing while continuing our efforts to universalize the CTBT. So that would be my advice to you.
Thank you for being brave enough to answer that question. I think we have time for one more.
Right here.
Today's discussion, but India and Pakistan has, to my recollection, not been mentioned at all. So my question
same. So they will be having this. We will be having the same very frank discussions with those two countries as we will with the others.
And maybe another. We've got time. There's a gentleman over there. There's still another roving mic. You may have to go all the way over.
Good morning, my name is Carlos. I come from the United States. I study at the University of Texas in Dallas. And I want to take some of these lessons and bring them back to my community to help bring
CTBT ratification without any delay.
And I would like to add, of course, to be connected with other young people. I think a lot of young people are attending this meeting today just to find a network in different countries to push something forward. I think that's always needed, and young people are going to initiate it.
And I think it's quite important to ask the what-if question. What would the world look like if we hadn't had the CTBT? You know, it's a generational thing too, but for people of my generation, the world looked very different when this wasn't in place. And I think thinking that we might not have it if we don't get the ratification is a really important place to start.
Any more questions while we wait for the Secretary General? Is anyone burning to ask a question before he comes? Okay. You can actually use the mic on you.
Because a new Secretary General will be appointed very soon, what would you like to see the new face of the UN do in regards to these issues?
Well,
Thank
first
you.
of all, I'd like that new face to be female.
I think we're a little bit with that question, but we'll leave it with the female. Anything related to the event? We've been told to be strict, so.
But
President Barack Obama for the time being, Mr. Kim?
well, I think all of us agree that we have to So about the destination, I don't think we have difference of views. But still, we are divided on how to get there. So about the modalities, we are still divided. So we have to build common grounds in identifying what will be the best way forward, not to lose the momentum to move toward the world free of nuclear weapons, which you all share.
And in particular, what about the initiative to create a WMD free zone in the Middle East? That seems to have where you
are trying hard to keep players in the region to the same room so that they can start talking among themselves about the steps which should be taken to create a zone free of WMD in the Middle East. And as I said, any steps to be taken, whether it is CTBT ratification or CWC ratification, still we have 2 countries left in the Middle East not to ratify Chemical Weapons Convention. And also implementation of JCPOA with Iran also we hope to show the utility, the importance of the verification mechanism as well. So with these issues, going forward, we hope we can revive the momentum to rekindle the move toward Middle East free zone of WMD. But of course, it is still very much uphill task. And we are very much conscious of doing something before it is too late, because next review cycle of NPT in 4 years' time will be crucial for the future of the NPT regime, and we intend to not to lose any time from now until 2020 when the next review should be done. So it is our top priority.
What's the formal status of?
I think.
Oh, yeah, are they arriving?
That's it. I think the Secretary General will soon be arriving. So.
Thank you so much. Very well done. See you.
As mentioned earlier on, please all join me in welcoming His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, Secretary of Test BAM Treaty.
Thank you. Dr. Lassina Jarbo, Executive Secretary of the CTBTO. Your Excellency, Mr. Michael Spindeleger, Chancellor and Dalgeshek, permanent representative of United Kingdom to the US, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization is not a celebration, but a reminder of a work remaining. It is a call to action. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the CTBTO has proven its value again and again. This organization is at the forefront of detecting possible nuclear tests. It has carried out activities far beyond what anyone imagined. During the Fukushima crisis, and again with the recent test by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the CTBTO proved its worth. With a sound science, a global reach, and a noble mandate, this organization is mobilizing young leaders and veteran officials. There has been great progress. The norm against nuclear testing has only been broken by 3 states, and only 1 this century. The verification system is 90% complete. I applaud your 2 decades of service to the world, and I stand with you going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been committed to ending nuclear tests since long before I became Secretary General. I remember myself having served as chairman of this preparatory committee nearly 20 years ago. Over the past decade, I have done everything possible to push this issue up on the international agenda. When I was serving as representative of Republic of Korea, I had the honor of presiding as chairman of this CTBTO. While assuming my chairmanship, I made the small talks saying that my name is Ban Ki-moon, but it is pronounced Ban, but it's spelled B-A-N. While I will encourage constructive dialogue, I will ban, using my name, the nuclear test. Since then, my nickname has been given like a nuclear test ban, Mr. Nuclear Test Ban, like this. So I still will carry that name, so I'll try to ban any nuclear test. So I really ask your strong commitment on this. A few years ago, I stood in the fields of Semipalatinsk of Kazakhstan to spotlight the damage from hundreds of tests there. And I have repeatedly pointed to the toxic legacy that some 2,000 tests left on people and the environment in parts of Central Asia, North Africa, North America, and South Pacific. Nuclear testing poisons water, causes cancers, and pollutes the area with radioactive fallout for generations and generations to come. We are here to honor the victims. The best tribute to them is action to ban and to stop the nuclear testing. Their sufferings should teach the world to end this madness. I welcome the voluntary moratorium against the testing, but this will never substitute for the legally binding CTBT. I again call on remaining states, 8 remaining states, to sign and ratify the treaty without further delay. The 8 countries that must ratify for entry into force have a special responsibility. They can advance us on the road to a nuclear weapon-free world. All countries can add to the pressure by ratifying. This strengthens the norm of universality. And it shows the world is united against the nuclear test. The CTBT is essential to realizing the vision of a world free of nuclear weapons. It puts a brake on their development in terms of quantity and quality. This is why the treaty forms a central part of my 5-point action plan on nuclear disarmament. I especially count on young people to press their leaders for action. And I really count on young people to raise your voice. You are not ministers, you are not ambassadors or any government officials, delegations, but you have a prerogative to raise your voice. Tell them, tell your leaders, and tell those countries who have not where 175 countries took part, breaking a global record for the most signatures in one day. It was most meaningful day. We could mark Mother Earth Day. I was very much encouraged by such a strong commitment and leadership shown by world leaders. Only after 4 months, when we were together in Paris last year, December last year, when they adopted Paris Agreement on climate change. The most number of countries who have shown such kind of a strong state commitment happened 34 years ago in 1982 in Montego Bay, Jamaica, when world leaders and delegations came to Jamaica to sign the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. At that time, 119 countries signed as soon as this convention was open for signature. But it is record-breaking, again, that in one day, as soon as this agreement for climate change was open for signature, 175, with almost 60 heads of state and government participating. That was the strong show of solidarity and commitment. This is why I'm talking about this climate change when we are talking about nuclear testings. This has clear implications and connectedness. When we have to make this world environmentally sustainable, there should be no further nuclear testings. Our planet still faces, however, the threat of nuclear weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, let us pledge today that we will not cease until all states are party to the treaty. That way, we can leave a safer world free of nuclear tests to our children and to succeeding generations of this world. And I thank you for your leadership and strong commitment. And thank you very much. Congratulations.
Secretary General, thank you very much for your statement there, and I think I'm thanking you on behalf of everybody here for your presence at this crucial event organized by the CTBTO and Dr. Lassina Zerbo. If I may, before I hand over to my colleague Julian Borgia, who is my co-moderator here, I will ask you a question which to me is Netherlands and Germany sit opposite the Iranians at the negotiation table in this very city, the Austrian capital, calling on the Islamic Republic to dismantle pivotal parts of its nuclear program. The JCPOA, as we've discussed earlier, has since been implemented and approved by the United Nations. Secretary General, you've already said that there are no right hands for the wrong weapons. This is a line that we're familiar with. So how do we assess which countries are deemed dangerous and irresponsible and others not?
As you said, it is very meaningful that we are having this very solemn commitment to prevent further nuclear testing in a city where the world leaders, in the form of P5+1 and 1, with Iranian delegations, committed to address this nuclear development program of Iran. That was a victory of multilateralism. And we have seen such kind of a victory of multilateralism in sustainable development goals and climate change agreement in Paris. So why not on this nuclear testing? There is an NPT universities. This is a matter of political will, lack to be part of this CTBT as soon as possible. There are so many challenges at this time. Development issues and humanitarian crisis, violences, conflicts, human rights violations. All we are living in an era of peril and challenges. But there are some good trends, the promises and expectations. I hope that we really make sure that on this 20th anniversary of CTBT, that we make sure that there is no further nuclear testing. It's rare that any treaty or has not been ratified after 20 years of signature. This is a very regrettable situation. And as I said, there is a clearly very important role for young people. You have a prerogative right to raise your voice. I'm asking you, working together with our delegations, I think we have to be united. That's a moral and political responsibility of leaders living today. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. I will now hand over to my colleague, Julian Borgia.
To start off with, do you think there should be a
council really address this issue very seriously? The Security Council is the organization primarily responsible for international peace and security. That's their very important responsibility. But often we have seen divisions within the Security Council. I've been urging the members of the Security Council, we have seen a great success whenever Security Council members were united, but we have seen such tragic situations continuing when Security Council members were divided. And then I'm urging Security Council again to address this issue more seriously, as they have done with Iranian nuclear development program. Now we have a very serious issue of nuclear testing done by DPRK. At the same time, the General Assembly has an easier way to raise and reaffirm international community's such commitment. There is no veto power. Therefore, I sincerely hope that the General Assembly and Security Council really look at this issue very seriously and take whatever resolutions and decisions they can take. I'm urging, as the Secretary General again, on this occasion of 20th anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have some questions from CTBT Youth. I think Deepshika, you wanted to ask something. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the floor. I'm a PhD candidate at Oxford University and I'm from India. Being here, I've had the opportunity to talk to some of the students
in Europe because of a continuing crisis in Syria. And there are poverty, abject poverty still going on. There are so many people are dying. There are many regional conflicts. I can name at least 10 burning fires around the world. At the same time, we have a very good prospect of this sustainable development goals and climate change. It will be very difficult to prioritize among all these issues. What I am asking as a Secretary General is that there should be a global solidarity based on humanity, based on international human rights and humanitarian law. This is something which I'm asking in principle. It's easy to say that I'm asking them, show your global solidarity. It may be easy. The problem is that the world leaders have not been united, they have not been committed because of their narrow national perspectives. But in this interconnected world, we are living in a transformative era in terms of science, in terms of the communication and transportations. What we say, what we discuss today here, it can be delivered within the fraction of a second to the end of this world. Therefore, we are living in a small world. There is no meaning of national boundaries. There is no such meaning of national interest. So your interest is mine, and my interest is directly connected with neighbors and even seemingly unconnected countries, far away, but they are tightly connected. Therefore, we have to address all these issues. The most important thing I'm asking the world leaders, they should bear moral and political responsibility for the people. The Charter of the United Nations starts with the peoples. What else? Who else are you working for? They should work for we the peoples. This is what is most important at this time. Now we have a lot of tools and means to address. The 21st century provides all the available tools and scientific evidences. It's a matter of a political will. There is I'm asking world leaders moral, political responsibility, and compassionate leadership for other people. It's not only you or me, us. It's not you and us, between you and us. It's us all together. We have to unite.
Another question from CTBT Youth. I think Michael had a question. You want to take it?
Thank you. I'm an intern for the CTBTO currently. Thank you for your inspirational words, first of all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I'm particularly grateful for the efforts that both the UN and also the CTBTO have made in reaching out to youth. My question is, therefore, what is the next step? How can organizations like the UN, like the CTBTO, engage and, more importantly, enable youth around?
Coming from raise this issue. It's not just one time today commemorating or committing ourselves. All the times. Frankly speaking, I've been speaking to most of the leaders of eight countries who have not yet ratified, whose ratification are essential for the entry into force of this CTBT. But I'm asking all the distinguished ambassadors and particularly young people to reach out. Now, political leaders are elected by the people. Then they have to listen to the voices of the people. And then I think young generation, particularly, as I said, I'm repeating, you are the custodian, you are the leaders of tomorrow. But even some of you have become leaders today. Therefore, you should also bear your responsibility. It's not only the work of ambassadors or ministers here. You should have a stronger ownership of this world. That's my honest appeal to you. That's why United Nations has been really putting a lot of priorities on the role of youth. For the first time in the UN history, I have appointed the special envoy on youth, very young person. But it's important that you make some networkings among yourselves and use your voice as a political power. And it's time that you really raise your voices on all the matters of our common concern on this CTBT.
Right, now it's the turn of my colleagues from the press. I think Francois Murphy from Reuters had a question. Do you want to take it from there? And I'll get out of the way. Can you see?
Sorry, hello. I actually have a joint question for you, Secretary General, and Mr. Zerbo. in the last undermines the institution in any way, and Secretary General to get closer.
All the urge any potential countries who could test the nuclear weapons. It is still a very important tool working at just giving a strong legal and political voice to restrain. On the basis of this kind of legally binding norm, the Security Council also acted decisively to take resolutions, adopt resolutions imposing economic and financial sanctions. Therefore, it's not because of sanctions, but because of their strong commitment for humanity to make this world better and safer for all the people. So I'm urging again those countries who have nuclear weapons or development programs, but to stop the testing and engage faithfully in nuclear disarmament negotiation process. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zoe, you had a question?
Yeah, the question whether the fact that this time we didn't come up with any evidence of radionuclide release that could be correlated to the seismic events in the Korean Peninsula, whether that undermines the organization. I would say no, for two reasons. The first reason is we clearly gave an indication of whereabouts the test has happened or the event has happened. We've come up with evidence of radionuclide isotope that were detected, but we weren't sure 90% or above that this was indeed coming from the Korean Peninsula. There were options that it could come from other places around the world. Until we have that assurance, and that this is made available to our member state for them to draw conclusion, what this does, it shows the importance of the entry into force and the importance of on-site inspection. Without entry into force, there's no mechanism for on-site inspection. On-site inspection will kick in under the CTBT if we detect an event and then by remote monitoring we have no evidence of radioisotope, then we have a mechanism to send inspectors on site with the technology that we have to be able to say for sure that this is indeed where the test has happened. So if he does anything, it promotes the entry into force of the CTBT and strengthen the verification regime as we're building it.
Okay, another press question.
Vanessa Kyungdaga, Japanese news agency, and I have a question also about North Korea. When we talk about the CTBT and entering force, we talk always about the 8 remaining candidates, and especially for North Korea because we think that it's a most difficult case. And Secretary General, you are from Korea. You know very much about the issue. And now, North Korea.
The parties to 6-party talks, members of the 6-party talks, including Japan, you are coming from, while the Security Council has imposed sanctions and DPRK has been now almost very much cut off from international communities, contact with the international community, it will be still very important and useful to try to have dialogue process. It seems that because of a very tense relationship and situation in and around the Korean Peninsula, then I believe that there is no substitute to the dialogue. Resolving all the conflict issues through a peaceful dialogue. That is what the United Nations always emphasizes. We have seen so many conflict issues, but there have been some violent means, like military means. But I'm deeply concerned about the current situation in and around the Korean Peninsula, particularly over these nuclear issues. But I believe that, I'm confident that the nuclear issue can be and should be resolved through dialogue. We have seen very good example of what the permanent members of the Security Council and Plus One and Germany and European Union discussed very seriously with Iranian delegations, and they finally adopted the joint comprehensive plan of action last July last year. And Iranian, all the sanctions which have been imposed upon Iran have been lifted. Now Iranian government and people are now engaging normally with the international community. I hope that the DPRK authorities will also very seriously consider and look at how international community is working. So I'm always in favor of resolving all these issues through dialogue.
I had another question. Secretary General, you're entering your last 6 or 7 months in office. You don't owe anybody anything in this last period in office. Are you going to be more vociferous, throw your weight around more on issues that are close to your heart, like climate change, like nuclear testing, nuclear issues in general, in these last few remaining months?
During my last 9 years and 4 months, I have been putting priorities, one of the top priorities on climate change and environmental sustainability, and including sustainable development, so that all the people in this world can live sustainably together with our planet Earth. And the priority is how we can make this world safer and more peaceful, more harmonious. So these are all interconnected ones. And in that regard, I will continue, even though I have 8 months to go in my mandate, but continue until very last minute of my term to make sure that the international community will seriously and rapidly implement the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change agreement. And I'm also urging all these negotiators on this nuclear disarmament to faithfully engage in negotiation. This nuclear disarmament agreement negotiation has been so slow, almost dormant at this time. Therefore, I'm urging that we have to reawaken this nuclear disarmament as well as this CTBT on this occasion, so that we will address all these challenges comprehensively in parallel.
I think we have time for one more.
At the back, you already asked, and I believe that there's a gentleman on the back there with the blue tie. Is there still a roving mic? If not, come forward to one of these lecterns there. It's just there, and press it on.
Thank you very much. My name is Ilya Kursenko from Russia. Those who wish to make this world a better place, it's crucial for us to know how the things that we do now shape us on the way to our dreams. How has winning a high school contest essay, Secretary General,
old boy. I was lucky enough to be invited to the United States. I was one of 120 or so young students from more than 40 countries. At that time, the world was in the middle of a Cold War. There was not much talks and young it was a very big, was so poor, devastated by Korean War. Then I thought that doing something for my country would be good and better. So I decided to become a diplomat, and I realized my dream, having become served as a diplomat and finally as a foreign minister, now doing something for the world as a Secretary General. That's good for me. What I'm telling you, young leaders present here, is that it's important for you to work for the humanity. I'm asking you to become a global citizen. Have a global vision. Wherever you may be coming from, it's not important now. It's a totally, tightly connected world. So the world needs your vision now. The global citizenship. This has been always, I'm asking, we need to really have global citizenship based on shared responsibility. Then when you have a shared responsibility, then all the issues can be resolved. While this world is going through still financial and economic difficulties, but it's not because of the lack of resources. There are still resources. It's a matter of how you distribute, how you use, based on the principle, or compassion, and the shared responsibility. Then you can solve this, even refugees and migration issues sweeping European continent. Therefore, I'm again asking you just to think about what you can do for the world, not only for yourself and for your own community. This your own community is a. Yeah, okay, thank
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
If I can ask everyone to remain seated, please, at the back.